Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me today is going to be Bud Hollowell. And we're going to be talking about one of his most recent books titled The Quantum Gateway. And in this book, he does a lot of talking about where science meets spirituality, and some might say religion, although myself personally, I would consider the two separate, since for me, spirituality is really more of an esoteric thing than religion is more of a exoteric and more dogmatic, whereas and you look toward the outward side more, whereas on spirituality you look toward the inside more. And I'm just breaking that down so that, you know, people kind of get an idea why I do break it down, in other words. But we're going to talk about that tonight because, in all honesty, Bud, and there are some other scientists out there that are coming into a new field where quantum physics is opening up and showing how there's a whole new science out there that's related to spirituality. And in my personal opinion, I think it's probably some of the similar knowledge the Egyptians had that was lost to us, but we can go into that during the show. I've talked to Bud a couple of times now, and I think it was very gracious to come on my show. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce him, and I'm going to let him tell you a little something about himself. Bud, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Royce. Thanks for having me on the show, and welcome, everybody.
I want to thank you for coming to the show. I really do enjoy you. You seem like a very nice, a very professional person, and I think we're going to really have a lot of fun tonight. I'm looking forward to it. But go ahead.
No, I agree with you. If we're not having fun, we're doing something wrong.
Here you go. So, real quick, why don't you tell us a little something about yourself and what got you in this particular area of research, in other words?
Well, Royce, I'm old, so I got a lot of stories. I'll try to keep them short here. For me, it all kind of started with baseball back in the 60s when I was a ball player and was using, it turns out, hypnosis to improve my batting skills, and later on went into the business of hypnosis. And one of the first clients I had up in Alaska started doing past life regression work, which just blew me away in the 1970s. But eventually started doing a lot of past life seminars, which led into exploring the different religions and their perspective, like Christianity, and how it takes a perspective towards reincarnation, which was very common for the first 5 centuries of the religion, and Hinduism, Buddhism, and so forth. And I was working at that for about 10 years doing past life classes. Then the issue of quantum physics came in, which caught me off guard at first in the 1980s. And then I really got into it, studying how it does explain a lot of the mystical experiences in all religions. So the bottom line being, when you have the mystical experience, for Christians, of course, it'd be like the born-again experience, or in the Buddhists and the Hindus, everybody has a description of that experience. And the point is, it is a real experience. And quantum physics allows us to get an idea of, yes, that is a real phenomena. The fundamental unit of consciousness is really the game. It's not matter, it's consciousness that's infinite. And the quantum physics now is starting to explain a lot of the whole fundamental pieces of mysticism.
Right. Now, I was going to let you know real quick, like Jennifer's sitting in there in the chat room, and she may not want me tattling on her, but she just said, wow, he's that old man. He looks great.
I still work out. You know, I'm old, but I'm not dead. We have here in Polk County, we have a senior games tournament. You got to be 50 to play, and I'm in the 69 group. And boy, there's some folks out here that can still do it. So I'm still out there throwing the discus and the javelin and running the 100 and so forth. So I'm still out there.
Well, I tell you what, you sound like you stay very active, and I would imagine probably just your research keeps you pretty active too, doesn't it?
Well, that does, yes. I've been teaching at the University of Phoenix for about 12 years now, and teach world religions and humanities, and have enjoyed that. But I've always enjoyed just a physical part of it, just running and working out. That's just part of my old carryover from baseball, I guess. But I found when I was living in Hawaii for a long time that if I didn't run and work out, then the meditation was very foggy. So it kept me working out so that I could think more clearly during meditation. That was helpful, too. It all fits together.
Okay. Well, listen, I was thinking, why don't you real quick, like, kind of give us a, sort of a brief summary about what you've kind of covered in your book, maybe what your, your end goal was for, your purpose.
Okay. The main goal was to tell the truth, not to get it, make a popular book, but just to lay it out. Here's what happened to me in the past 65 years, and here's what happened with quantum physics the past 65 years, and here's how it fits into all the world religions. For folks out there that are maybe sitting at the desk and have a pen or a piece of paper, if you draw a target, and the outer ring, then the inner ring, and then the very center ring, like a bullseye, one of the ways to explain how this fits together, the outer ring is religion. And the farther away you get from the center, the more individual it becomes. So you have Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, and so forth on the outer ring. And if you keep on going away, pretty soon you splinter the Christianity into different sects and finally down to one church that everybody thinks my church is the only one in town. So the farther out you go from the center, the more individual and strange and weird it gets. So at the outer ring you have religion. And most of us don't know that religion is a starting point. It's not an ending point. It's where you begin. So once you get maybe some clues about what the real game is here, you move to the inner ring, which is scholarship, where if you're a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu, you study the Gita real carefully, or the Kabbalah of the Hebrews real carefully, or you want to know exactly what happened in the Book of Ruth and from the earliest writings, but you really study it to start to get the real teachings, not the culture, the religion in the outer ring, but the inner ring. And that, if you push on that, you may start to eventually move towards the very center of the bullseye, which is the mystical experience. Because every religion is based on someone doing something that had this extraordinary experience. They come back from this thing, and they tell their followers that, man, I am the Father, one, you've seen me, you've seen the Father, or it's all one, or we're all, there's this atonement. But at that quantum level, it doesn't square with our space-time experience, so it sounds very crazy. And there's no words for us in the West to talk about it. In the East, they have words for it, but not in the West. But you have this very absolutely real experience, more real, actually, than what we're doing right now, the oneness of it all. But it defies our language, because it's not in space-time, it's timeless. But that's really what we find now with quantum physics. It leads us to the awareness that, yes, Virginia, there is something beyond space-time, and we can prove it. That something beyond space-time contains all past and future. We can prove that too. And it operates like this phenomenal consciousness, this one consciousness. Now, to me, that's the 21st description of what we used to call God, that phenomena. But it is in that quantum level that defies our space-time logic that sounds so screwy. But a lot of people are pushing on it now to understand how it fits together. So that's kind of my basic take on this whole thing and why I wrote the book, is try to explain how I arrived at this juncture where I can, because I still am an intellectual junkie. I still like to think hard. But in college, I did the Campus Crusade for Christ, and I was deeply into Christianity there for a while. But as you keep pushing, you realize, well, there's something more here, but I'm not getting the straight stuff, so you drop the religion, you keep the words of Jesus, you keep moving. But eventually, for me, you cycle back around after I studied the Hindu teachings and the Buddhist teachings and the Sufi teachings of Islam and so forth, and you find it's really more a study of vocabulary It's like whether you use an Apple machine or a PC. You learn how to work it. So that's what that means. So for me, all the religions are very useful if you understand the vocabulary.
Right. And you also, a lot of people don't also realize on these religions that so many of them have so much more in common than they themselves don't even realize.
Absolutely. One of the difficulties we have is we tend to associate our religion with our culture, like American Christianity, or God wants us to be rich or wants us to be powerful. Well, that's nuts. If we really study the teachers in each of the religions, they're absolutely wonderful and right on the money. Now, the culture will take it and distort it and quite often use religion as a weapon to go to war. But if we can really sit and listen to the real teachers, they're absolutely congruent. Compassion, love, forgiveness, all the qualities that we all admire. But that's too tough. That's hard work to get to that level.
Well, I got to tell you. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm with you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, one of my listeners in there, Jen, was just saying, or not saying, but she was showing me that she went and checked out your PowerPoint on your site because her questions are derived from your PowerPoint slide.
Okay.
One of them. Okay. I think she probably looked at more than one. Her first question was, wouldn't you say the Ardipithecus from 4.4 million years ago presented in your PowerPoint human evolution on slide 19 looks a lot like Bigfoot?
Oh, I have no idea. That's a good point. I don't know. I'm not much of an expert on Bigfoot, but the evolution of the human animal through the 12 different fossil records, I think if we go back a couple million years, we can see how our particular structure has evolved till finally we have our latest version of what we call the biped, which is the Homo sapien, which started about 170,000 years ago. But if you back up a couple million years ago, it does look a lot like these pictures these folks are supposedly claiming is Bigfoot.
So I imagine you probably heard about this more than once then, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I have no personal experience with that, but in terms of the science and of the human evolution, that's pretty clear. And I find that very useful to realize that this whole thing, all of it, is consciousness. The fundamental theme of everything is consciousness. Those folks out there listening, your cat's conscious, your dog is conscious. They're all doing the best they can too. Everything thinks it's human,
Right. I tend to really agree with you that at the end of the day, if you didn't have consciousness, well, then what told matter how to arrange itself to have what you got? Mm-hmm. I mean, they say the Big Bang happened by chance, but I mean, there are trillions actually more than trillions, who knows how many gazillions of molecules and atoms all compacted into trees, animals, different animals, humans, planets, you name it.
Right.
Well, something had to be able to, otherwise wouldn't it just kind of come up like a bowl of gelatin or something?
I don't know. Some of these questions are too far beyond us to give a very intelligible answer to, but there's all kinds of theories on that one. But I know that we can prove, not we, meaning me, but scientists have shown very clearly. Back in 1937, I believe it was, Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen had an experiment that they proved on paper that later on they substantiated with hardware in the 1970s, where they said that you could have two correlated photons. You split them off. These photons have been together. You split them, so now they're zipping along at 186,000 miles a second in one direction, and the other one's going the other direction. And if you mess with one of these photons, the other one instantaneously knows about it.
Yes.
In other words, In other words, beyond the speed of light, but instantaneously. That drives scientists nuts. Instantaneously. In other words, there's no distance between them. There's no time between them. At the quantum potential level, there is no time and there is no space. It's all one consciousness. And that blows us completely away. But that's the reality of it.
So there is another question, by the way, but I wanted to mention while you're saying what you are. And this is just me using my logic, and goodness knows I'm not a college man, but from my point of logic, from what you're describing, wouldn't that be sort of, if you wanted to, say, apply a futuristic movie where they have subspace out there that you can travel to as well as space? It would be kind of like this other area. There'd be a area like subspace where time and space does not exist, that could cover all of time and space in the real space.
It gets pretty heady real fast, trying to even keep up with this kind of stuff. But in terms of space-time, with quantum physics, our space-time here that we have, that we experience, the sense of duration, because the body goes through the past, present, future, at the timeless level, at the quantum level, at that point, it's all one consciousness, and there is no space, and there is no time. But trying to explain that, trying to talk about it, trying to make sense of it, it makes us stop.
Yes.
And this is why we look at the world religions, and most all of the master teachers, they come back and say, they talk in parables because you can't explain it.
Well, that is true. I mean, you're like you say, this is, I'm trying to think of, like Babylon 5 or Star Trek or Star Wars to, describe what, how it would appear to me. So you can imagine what it would be like for people who had never seen those movies to try to put it in writing, in other words.
Yes. You have a paranormal show here, Royce, and one of the things you probably had on some psychic readers, and people do past life work and do clairvoyant work and so forth, right?
Yes, sir.
One of the things that is fairly common as you drop into doing that kind of work, and I'm not a reader, that's not my path, but I've done a lot of that kind of stuff, is giving up the illusion of being Bud or Royce and starting to move into the possibility that my true nature is pure light, pure consciousness, beyond time and beyond space. And that takes some practice, but the idea is to give up the illusion of the ego and open to the reality of the quantum self, or the pure light, if you want, or God, or whatever words you want to use. At that point, I am everywhere at all times. But trying to talk about that makes you sound like an idiot. It just doesn't compute. But the feeling, when you drop into that, if you get deep enough into the meditation and you clear enough, then that becomes a reality.
Well, yeah, and if you stop and think about it, because this came to my mind while I was listening to you a minute ago, and maybe I'm a strange person, but I got to thinking, if I go out on my street and I look down the road, you can see 2-3 blocks down the road fairly easy. During this 2 or 3 blocks, you can see all the trees lining the road. You can see all the houses and everything at a single glance, although you have not traversed out all of that space. Your body could not do it without spending 3, 4, 5 minutes to walk the distance, but your eyes and your mind and consciousness could take it all in less than a second.
Right.
And that's kind of what it sounds to me like what you're describing.
Well, some of the people listening perhaps have practiced different types of clairvoyant or psychic or whatever type of skills, and they're skills. This takes practice, but normally we don't think that we don't think about it as a skill, so we just think it's kind of weird or magical. But for some people are very good at clairvoyance, where you would sit where you are sitting right now, then imagine going up 100 feet looking down at your house, or going to a restaurant downtown and looking up like 500 feet looking down at the city. You practice locations and looking down and seeing what you get, you start to get where you can start to get good at it. So you don't have to be in the body to do that kind of stuff. Now, when we think about that in our space-time logic, like Bud and Roy's talking, that's spooky. That's like, whoa, you're some sort of psychic weirdo now. I'm going to burn a cross on your lawn. But if you really get into the practice of consciousness and work with the possibility that my true nature, not Bud, but my true nature is pure light, pure consciousness, beyond time, beyond space, and I am everything everywhere, then it starts to make these things very natural. And as you get skilled at that, then you hit another level of like, I better not do this anymore. Because it's more traps.
But yeah, and it can get pretty deep the further you go into it, but yet it's very fascinating stuff. But before I forget, I want to move on to the next question, because she also mentioned in chat she's got another question waiting too. So I'm sure she's fixing to paste it, so I'll go ahead and get this one out. The statement on your PowerPoint, Human Evolution on 21, quote, variation has a genetic origin due to mutation and recombination. Wouldn't you say that these mutations has been tampered with mostly by all types of governments around the world due to all the chemicals and toxic waste that they have poured in the air, water, and soil, and have allowed our farmers and companies to put chemicals into our food and products, and have allowed cows to eat cows as an example, and not forgetting all these lab tests with humans and animals and the creation of various viral military warfare bacteria. This was a big one, and viruses such as AIDS, for example, thus now knowing it as a fact that human cannot get AIDS from any animals.
Well, the evolution over, the millions and billions of years is the natural selection piece that we can prove, very rock solidly. Now, the time period we're in now in the 20th, now 21st century, where we're really polluting the environment, that's fairly new phenomena in terms of the scale at which we're polluting the environment. So yes, we're starting to see problems now genetically, where if we know that when people put lead in the drinking water, for example, upstream, a plant puts water in the stream, the kids downstream who are born in that town have a 5-point less IQ level. I mean, we can prove, we have the data to show how absolutely horrible these things are resulting in without, taking care to protect the environment. But I'm afraid, as always, money runs the game.
Yeah.
And if we to try and fight big corporations who are paid to make a profit, it's a very, very difficult challenge, not just in our country, but around the world. I think one of the very difficult, no, that's not right, that's not the right word. One of the mistakes I think we as human beings have made is allowing corporations to be developed and have this individual identity where profit-making supersedes the human experience.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you, but it does, it goes on a lot more than what it should, but, human nature, runs on all levels, including government, in other words.
Yeah. The American Indians, several hundred years ago, their approach to doing things was you think, before you take action on something, you consider 7 generations from now. How will it affect 7 generations from now? Today, we just, how will it affect my bank account tomorrow? We're completely short-sighted. And we're going to pay a heavy price for that, unfortunately.
So that leads to something else that I was thinking about asking you, which basically is, do you think there's any danger somewhere down the road people could begin to say, like, mutate physically, become unrecognizable as human, for example, if this continues, in other words?
over the next 10 or 20 generations, perhaps it will make some, I'm sure, some very definite changes. We put so much radiation in the air from nuclear explosions and contaminations and all the pesticides and a whole host of things we've done to the ocean and the water. The real scary part is we really don't know what's going to happen. We just can't predict how that will affect the genetic line, how it will affect the DNA and the people that will follow behind us. It's real tough to know.
But because there's so much money to be lost, and not just the money, there's so many people that's not going to want to do without their luxuries, for example, that depends on some of this. Nobody wants to discontinue it. They'd rather look for solutions to it. But the problem is, it seems to me like these solutions are coming, pretty slow.
Well, one of the things that's encouraging to me is the Arab Spring here recently, where we've had thousands of human beings link up on Twitter, for crying out loud, and Facebook, and it's been incredible amount of change that we're creating, some power to the people kind of thing, which is one of my war cries from the 60s. It's tough to know how quickly humanity will be able to fight back against the more uncontrolled greed. So we have a few people in the world that are hoarding the money, whether it's from the gold or oil or wheat or whatever it happens to be, and maybe as a species of humanity be able to claim rights to the entire thing, where we can eliminate some of the private ownership. Now, people say, well, you're a socialist, you're a communist, or what. It doesn't matter what we label it, but somehow we have to design a way to live in the 21st century where everybody can win. Everybody, not Americans, not the Japanese, everybody has to win.
Not corporate America, not the church or
America.
Any one person, but the humanity as a whole, in other words.
Everybody, every humanity. Well, true story. I had a lovely experience to participate in the Olympics in 1964 as a baseball player. And I went over there to represent America, and that was just absolutely just terrific. I loved it. And I was very proud to be there. And as I was there for a few weeks there in Japan, I'd walk back into the Olympic Stadium and I'd see all these flags from all the different countries up there. And after a while, something different happened to me. I thought, we should take all of the national flags down and just have the single Olympic flag with the white background with the multiple colored rings. Because to me, it seemed I went from being an American to an earthling. The competitors, we weren't America versus anybody. It was just guys trying to beat gravity, beat the stopwatch. It was just it was a celebration. I came back to the United States and tried to tell my friends about it, and they thought I was kind of strange, and I didn't know how to explain it well. 20 years went by, and Edwin Moses in the L.A. Olympics finished the 440 hurdles, and the closing ceremonies of the Olympics, the lady had a microphone and walked over to Edwin Moses and said, Edwin, come here and talk to us, and tell us, what do you think? How does it feel to be here? And he said, I feel like a citizen of the universe. That was the experience of the human experience, not being an American or the Chinese or the Russians, but
or not even earthling, but universe.
Yeah. So to me, if we're just now going through the birthplanes of a global consciousness, being able to start to think as humans rather than Americans or whatever nationality or Floridians, but being able to realize we all bleed red. All of our tears are salty. Everybody wants to watch their grandkids grow up. They don't want to go to war for anything. Then maybe we can fight back at some of the economic vulgarities to create a more peaceful and fair world. That's my hope anyway.
Well, hopefully your book would, be part of the spearhead of such a thing. Before we forget, I wanted to mention real quick, because there's people that's going to be hearing this at YouTube later, at Dailymotion, iTunes, where, all kinds of places, that if you want to catch the show live, join and chat with the other people here. would love to have you here. It's www.paranormalpalace.com. And while you're here, you could also, sign up for the newsletter. And that way you'll always know when we have shows coming up. And I also wanted to mention, because I got all carried away talking to Bud here, he's such an interesting man, that he's got a website at www.oneworldinsight.com. And I also put his link in the chat room. Sadly, my chat room's not designed to link. I got a PHP nuke script, and I have to go with the chat that comes with that, so it doesn't have all the luxuries there all the time, guys. But you can copy and paste that link and, put it up in your address bar, and you can check out his site. In fact, I wanted to apologize to everybody for the music that you heard a minute ago. That was me going to his site to get the link and put it in the chat room. I guess you might have heard it and wondered, might have even thought you recognized it.
I thought I was online for a minute.
You're looking at your web. You're looking at your browser. Did I open one window?
Yeah, the oneworldinsight.com has some TV shows that I do here in Florida on mysticism and world religions and so forth. It's kind of a fun site.
So you haven't just educated yourself in religion or in mysticism or in physics, but you've actually studied the whole entire gambit in order to have a balanced view. Is that correct?
Well, I guess I'm kind of a slow learner, Rice. I just enjoy learning stuff. One of the luxuries I've had teaching for the University of Phoenix for the past 12 years is I've taught about 40 different courses, and I just love taking a new course and going through it and PowerPointing it and cranking it, teaching it. You learn so much more teaching. So I've had a very privileged opportunity to teach so much, and I really like that. But the world religion really has been my specialty. That was trying to explain all the what we used to call past life phenomena that was happening in the 70s and 80s and 90s. But I really enjoyed it. I was very privileged to learn all that stuff.
I bet I would have been felt very privileged as well. But real quick, you got a couple questions here. One from Les, but there was one waiting from Jen again. God bless her. I love her. She just asks so many questions. She always so active, and I just love having people that, ask questions because it lets you guys know that people are listening. You know what I mean? But,
good.
All right. Let me go ahead and get her question. There was something I was going to mention a minute ago, and I'll be doggone if I didn't forget what it was, but maybe it'll come to me while you're answering this one.
Okay.
In your PowerPoint critical thinking on slide 6, the quote, "Cats are really the supreme species," unquote, and below is showing a picture of an orange cat sleeping on a lazy boy. Can you elaborate on this theory?
Sure.
Because I know they are self-healing animals. They manage their emotions ever well. They have a sixth sense. They can process information with trial and error on their own, and by watching other cats, even other animals. I also know they are free because they understand more than we know they do. And you know what? She studies a lot, but yet they tend to not follow the rest of the herd.
I was just kind of having fun with that slide, but for those of us who are cat owners, and I am, of course, and their work is real good. They teach us how to treat them. They spend all day rehearsing for a nap. And they do everything with absolute pleasure. And if they're uncomfortable, they work so that we can finally get them a pillow. And to me, they live pretty doggone good. At least our cats live good. So I thought, man, that's pretty good. They don't go to work. They just sleep, eat, and teach us how to treat them. I think that's pretty good. And they do treat us as though they were royalty, don't they?
Right. Now, Bud,
yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to mention real quick, up to now, our quality has been great, but for some odd reason, while you were speaking just now, you kind of started breaking up. Have you changed your location or something, or?
Nope, I'm still here.
Oh, now you sound just fine. I don't know what happened for a minute, but I guess that's modern day technology. But go ahead and finish, and I'm sorry I interrupted.
I was just going to mention that those of us who have had a dog and a cat, you realize that after a while the dog thinks it's human, but if you have a good cat and you treat him well, the cat might consider you being a cat. Because they consider themselves to make the highest species. But I enjoy them.
Yeah, well, we have about 3 dogs ourselves, and I got to tell you, they all 3 maintain a jealousy war at all times.
Someone asked also about my perspective on theosophy.
Yes, I was just fixing to mention that was Les's question. That was the next one.
Didn't use no psychic skills. Actually, my wife handed me a note. But the Theosophical Society in Fort Lauderdale, I've done a few talks for them down there, and I really enjoy them. And some of the work they've done with Annie Besant, with Blavatsky, all that stuff that laid the groundwork for bringing our Western world into the spiritual teachings, I think has been phenomenal. And yes, much of their stuff has been very useful in my education. Yes, Alice Bailey, Blavatsky, all those folks were pioneers for a lot of us in the West.
Yeah, the one thing that I would mention to everybody is when you're, because I'm with him, I recommend checking out Buddhism, Theosophy, Judaism, Christianity, all of them. But what you want to bear in mind is, contrary to what a lot of people seem to think, no single one religion really has a monopoly on the truth and knows everything and can point out the way, and they do all disagree. The idea is to probably glean the best from all of them to form a well-rounded picture. Would you agree with that, Bud?
Yeah, pretty much. When I'm doing world religions and teaching that class, I start off with one of the metaphors that comes out of the ancient Hindu teachings, which I find very useful. And the story goes, there's 2 kings, and they're friends. And one king says, my friend doesn't have an elephant. I'm going to send him an elephant. So he sends word to his friend that he's going to get an elephant. So the king who's going to get an elephant says, man, I've never seen an elephant. I wonder what that's like. So he sends 5 blind men out to investigate this elephant. And they come back, and the first blind man says, well, I investigated the elephant, and it's like a big tree, because he has his arms around the leg. The other 4 blind men said, what? Are you kidding me? That's not a tree. And the next blind man said, it's like a wall, because he was touching the side. The other guy said, no, it's like a snake, because he had the tail. No, it's like a banana tree, because he had the ears. And every blind man was correct, but the elephant was too big to take in. In the same way, the truth is too big to take in by anybody. It's vast. So every religion has a piece. So me, from my perspective, if we take the time to study the different teachings, we begin to get a better picture of what the game is. So the religion piece, again, is the outer ring of knowledge. The real stuff is where you start moving towards the center. And that's the real practice. Anyway,
yeah, you know what? I've read that online before. Wasn't that a Buddhist saying originally, or was that just one that they used that maybe went further back?
That's ancient. That goes back thousands and thousands of years in the Hindu teachings. Matter of fact, if you study the Hindu teachings from the Upanishads and the Vedas, you're pretty much right on the money, because much of what we have in the West came out of the Hindu teachings, if you track it back far enough. But matter of fact, quantum physics also was explained from the Hindu teachings. So there it is. Same thing with the Buddhist teachings. They talk about the 2 truths. Boom. The descriptions of what we now have in quantum physics, you can just read the works of the Buddhists and Hindus. Up there, they had it right there, 4,000 years ago. Good stuff.
Oh, and you know what? I just remembered what it was I was going to mention earlier. It was about, I was going to say that everything that you're mentioning here, it's not really just you. I said this earlier. I've had Bernard Hayes on my show. He's a physicist, and he's had the same findings about where quantum physics meets spirituality. I've had astronaut Edgar Mitchell on. He founded the, for noetic sciences there. And he actually, when he mentioned the same thing you did about how particles can be separated by billions of miles and still communicate, in other words.
Yes.
Instantaneous.
Yes.
And I don't know if he's the one that discovered it, but he mentioned it on my show long ago when Hurricane Ike came through here. And there's been other people, like I say, that's in a similar field as you are, that has done it. So, I think science is gradually, starting to, catch up with ancient religion, in other words, and find the lost knowledge. I want to say it was Bernard Heichen in his book mentioned the fact that also that in order for a thing, and they're just learning this in quantum science recently, for a thing to exist, it has to first be observed, in other words.
Yes.
And now this sounds strange to some people because the first thing people want to ask, well, who observed all of creation? Well, then that would be God originally.
Well, we get caught in the words on that one. But to get back to quantum physics on that one, one of the things that happened, if you got a minute here with this, a little bit of the history of the quantum physics evolution. Back in 1800, they proved that light operated like a wave, because they could take a light bulb, they shine it through two cuts in a wall, and on the back wall there'd be a wave pattern. So they thought, okay, light is a wave. Well, 100 years go by, and in 1905 they discovered that light could also operate like a particle. So I thought, somebody instantly thought, well, I wonder what happens if we shoot one particle towards these two slits, what would happen? So they tried this, and they thought, well, of course, it would operate like a golf ball, where the particle would zip through one or the other. So in the back wall, over time, you'd have, two strips. Well, it turns out, if you measured those particles and watched them, that's exactly what happened. But if you covered it so you couldn't see what was going on, it operated like a wave. Now, catch this. A particle, like a golf ball, operated like a wave. It went through both slits simultaneously and operated like a wave. That's impossible, completely impossible. Well, it's still a mind lord for us today. But what came from that is the awareness that consciousness plays an important part in what we call space-time reality. If I'm not conscious of particles, everything is a wave. But if I'm watching something, boom, it becomes a particle. So reality that we know, our familiar space-time, is based on being conscious of particles. And there's where we are. But behind this apparentness, which we call space-time, which was familiar to us, there is this incredible, phenomenal quantum potential that's all waves of potential particles. And that just completely blows us away. Yeah.
I got to tell you, that's got to be mind-boggling research to get into, though, doesn't it?
It gives you a headache.
I know that when I read Bernard Heich's book, and he got to explaining some of this stuff, at certain points, being a high school grad, I got to admit, I thought I was reading Greek for a few minutes.
Roy, someone asked me about what age do I feel I should, that I start doing this kind of work. And now I'm 69 right now. But I started doing the work with hypnosis back in the 60s, a little bit with athletic performance, and I had no sense of the spiritual game at all. I kind of gave up on the Christian idea. I kept the words of Jesus, could have made sense, but the rest of it didn't make any sense at all. But when I got into the hypnosis business later on, and I started working initially in the 70s with teaching past life seminars, I had things that I was experiencing with my students 4 nights a week for like 5 years of working this kind of stuff, and I needed to understand how this could explain past life experiences, which led me to study the Christian teachings and the Buddhist teachings and the Sufis and the Islam and so forth. But so for me, the age that I really got into this was in my late 30s, And there was a moment in time where I was having these experiences, and I was working with thousands of people doing this, and at the same time I had quite a strong resistance to some of the more fundamentalist Christian folks who were praying I would die. And I had to decide, am I going to do this? Am I going to do it right? Am I going to do it with absolute ruthless truth and compassion, or do I cave to these people? So for me, it was like, I'm in. I'm going to follow this where the truth leads me. And that, at the age, for me, it was my mid-30s when that happened, to follow the real stuff. And then I got exposed to the Ram Dass, and when he was the chairman of the Harvard department, Harvard psychology department, who went to India and found his guru. And he later on gave us Westerners a sense of the real spiritual teachings. Then I read Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda, which again was a huge breakthrough for me when I realized this is doable stuff. But another piece, I was one of the speakers at a conference in Santa Monica back in the early 80s, and one of the speakers on this 7-day and 7-night experience was a man named Swami Sachdananda. And I had a chance to talk with him, and for me, the reality of finally meeting some people who were doing the spiritual path, really doing the spiritual path, was an incredible commitment for me. Like, okay, this is doable. I'm in. It was not religion. It was the teachings, the real teachings. Anyway, in terms of age, I think it just, life kind of hits you with a meringue pie once in a while, and you do it. You just say, okay, I'm in.
So now, you talked about these phone calls before and reincarnation. I take it that you do past life regressions then?
Used to. I've worked with about 7,000 people doing that over the years.
So he's kind of, you've kind of gotten away from it recently or something?
I got out of it just like we moved from Alaska to Hawaii, then to Colorado, and I started teaching at the university, and just a matter of time, and I started doing the regular professor stuff, and my wife, Sheila, she was working at Columbine during that massacre, worked the recovery of that, and that really hurt her health quite a bit, and we wanted to move into Florida. And just kind of had my hands full doing regular professor stuff in the college. And then we have a little home care business here in Lakeland, Florida. And it's just a matter of time and energy and effort.
So are you guys, are y'all planning on, or should I say are you planning on getting another book out on the market in the future?
I am. Mm-hmm. I am working on a workbook on the incarnations. And it should be out here in another 6 months or so. I'm also going to republish a book that a friend of mine and I wrote in the 80s called The Eternal Dance. There was a 22-chapter, 500-page book on reincarnation that we really are very proud of, and we're going to get that back out here this year, too.
That sounds very, very interesting. Yeah. Of course, like I said, I've got a real interest in anything that, joins science and religion because, like I said at the beginning of the show, it seems to me like this is where everything's going to end up meeting at, or where it probably met at, back in the days of Egypt, in other words.
Oh, yeah, back beyond that. One of the things that you also, maybe some of your listeners might appreciate as you get, and this journey is a very long one. It's a very long process of unfolding here. And early in the journey is you're accumulating knowledge. You're trying to gather stuff and gather stuff and gather stuff from all kinds of pieces. Later on, when you start getting the idea, okay, here's where we're going, here's what I need to do, when you shift from knowledge to wisdom, you start subtracting stuff. You start dropping stuff, letting go of this, letting go of that, letting go of this, letting go of that. So knowledge is addition, wisdom is subtraction. Giving up what you used to think you were, giving up anger, giving up jealousy, giving up being American, giving up, letting go of all that stuff. So for me, I went through a tremendous process of accumulation there, and now I'm really working on the subtraction piece, letting go of more and more stuff.
Yeah, and I've had to go through that experience myself. But I think that's really sort of a part of growth and maturing, or at least it has seemed that way for me.
Agree. Yep.
Which I hope it means I grow up and not old.
No, absolutely. Nothing against being old. I'm old now, and I plan on being here a while longer, but trying to just dance while the music's playing and enjoy the entire experience and try to contribute as much as I can back to be of service, which is about the only thing that's really interesting anymore, is trying to be of service.
Right.
Help people stop the unnecessary suffering.
Okay, now I was going to mention to you that we've been on for almost an hour. Did you want to continue this on a little further, or did you want to go ahead and wrap?
I'm with you. Let's just run this thing until we feel like stopping.
All righty. Now, let's see. I was also going to ask you, though, can you tell us, you said that you're, in your book, you wanted to talk about, different religions and their relation to quantum mechanics. So basically what you're coming to in the book is there's something, a connection between, say, like the Holy Spirit or the Spirit or consciousness or the being spirit, that it's also that's related to science. There's a connection in all of that, in other words?
Well, if we're talking about in Christianity, the Holy Spirit and those kind of words, they're loaded words. It's like the word God, and this is one of the things that was very helpful for me in graduate school and college was a course called General Semantics, where it just takes a while to think through, but you start to really get a perspective that all the words that you and I are using right now are just noises. They're just noises, but they're noises we have a certain familiarity with that we give it meaning to. Same thing with when you write out a word, it's just a scratch on a paper or a blip on a screen. Mm. They're noises and scratches. That's what language is. That we tend to assign things certain values, but we forget that we are creating the value for it. Like the strong wind at sea. It's just wind. We say, well, that's Hurricane Kathleen. Whoa! Then all of a sudden it has a certain character, a certain quality that we take into our system. In the same way, we take words like God, Jesus, bicycles, Islam. Pick a noise. Again, a noise, and we associate values for it. Now, part of giving up and letting go of stuff is realizing all the patterns I picked up in my life, whether it's from my Baptist upbringing or from my experiences in Islam, it's all just experience. They're not good or bad. It's just experience. But I start labeling it, and I go down these cul-de-sacs and crash. So I try to avoid words that have these tangles to them, like God, Holy Spirit, so forth, because they use the same descriptions in the Buddhist teachings of the Hindu teachings. They're just different words. So for me, if we bypass all that, the reality of it is, behind all of that, there is this one consciousness, capital O-N-A consciousness, that is our true nature, our true identity. And religion, if it's done correctly, is a sign that points that direction. So whichever religion we have, well, here it is. Here's something you might enjoy. One of the holy men that I've had a chance to meet in my life was a man named Swami Kriyananda. And I was in a meeting with him one time, and at the end of his talk, he said, there's a saying in India that it's often blessed to be born into a religion, but unfortunate to die in one. I went, what? He said, well, if religion is, all religions are like ladders to climb to God, the truth. So if you have a Christian ladder, that's fine. If it's a Buddhist ladder, that's fine. If it's a Jewish ladder, that's fine. Now don't stop to worship the ladder. Right? So whichever ladder, whichever religion, perfect. But just to get you to the next level, then you throw the ladder away. You know, and that's part of the progression when you move from the religion to the spiritual. Is you appreciate the ladder, but okay, now I'm on to something different.
So it's kind of like, more of a, learning to grow in the spirit than it is learning to grow into anything materialistic, in other words, or it's about a maturing of the actual you, the consciousness, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is keep your eye on the center of the target, which is to experience the oneness, or in the Christian sense, you might call it the Christ consciousness, or the Buddha nature, or the Tao, or whatever. Again, the words are just noises. But in deep meditation, if we can remove all the blocks, remove all the ego, we can experience the reality of that one consciousness.
Now, one of the things that I've noticed from my studies of religion is really the idea is not, I say this because I know a lot of people have made this mistake before. It's not about destroying the ego so much as it is about integrating the ego. Learning, for example, which side rules, or should I say rules, how does the soul interact with the ego and vice versa? Would that be a better way of describing it?
Sure, that'd be a way to use our Western approach to it. For me, the blocks for me tended to be my culture, my language, my religion, my history. All of my experiences have been useful, and they're also traps. So when I start talking about letting go and deleting things, it's getting to where we can sit, capital S, sit in meditation with deep quietness. Now that sounds easy, and it is the toughest thing. As a professional baseball player, blocking home plate, that's easy. Meditation, that's tough. That's really work. That's really work. But trying to remove all of the obstacles that draw me back into being Bud, but being in that space of trying to have extreme sanity, real sanity, and understanding my true nature. And that's the goal for me, is true sanity. Not Bud being well-adjusted, but beyond that.
Right. Now, we got a call coming in, so let me go ahead and take that real quick.
Okay.
Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Jen.
Hi. Message. It's a question for Bud.
Okay.
Go for it.
Yeah. Hi, sir. How are you?
I'm just fine. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I had a question on meditation.
Okay.
I saw in your PowerPoint that you had 4 types of meditation.
Uh-huh.
Like the simple and going right down to the unconsciousness.
Uh-huh.
And you see, when I do meditation, I get into this trance where I feel things, and it's more like somebody touching me, and I hear things, and everything is just quiet, and everything is just soft.
Uh-huh.
Pardon?
Yes, I'm with you.
Okay. So my question was, which one of the 4 would you consider that to be in?
For me, everybody has their own style. I think when we have the categories, they're just kind of a general, this may happen to the average person, but there's an author that I really enjoy called Meher Baba, M-E-H-E-R, Baba, who was a Sufi master. He was silent his last 32 years, didn't speak a word, but he wrote. And he said meditation in the spiritual path is like the flight of a bird. It's not like a path where there's stepping stones. You have to kind of cut your own path. With meditation, for myself, I followed his suggestion where in the West, we've been told, well, you meditate twice a day for 20 minutes, for example. That kills me. I can't do that. That's not part of my game, that discipline stuff. But Mayor Baba said to meditate when your heart is full, when you can't wait to be in the presence of God or the great presence with a capital P or that mystical experience. And let the experience teach you how to do it. So I wouldn't pay much attention to which category you're in, but just try to see if you can get quiet and open your heart to love and your mind to the higher teachings.
I like
that making sense?
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it's exactly what I read in your PowerPoint. Well, one of the other ones.
Uh-huh.
So it all comes back to the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. All right, and I just wanted to tell you fantastic work on all the PowerPoints.
Well, thank
Very
you.
clear. I loved it. And bravo.
Well, you might enjoy some of the television shows, too, if you like the PowerPoints.
Television shows?
Yeah, they're on the multimedia library on One World Insight. Yeah, there's about 22...
Are you talking about in the States?
It's
on the...
I'm not hearing you very well there.
You're kind of breaking up.
You're breaking up a little bit.
Is this better?
Yeah, breaking up. There, that's better, yeah. On the OneWorldInsight.com site, there's a multimedia library, and under television, there's about 20 different television shows that I've done on this kind of stuff.
Okay. I thought it was on the TV here on... I'm old school, you know? I still look at the TV. I still watch the thing.
I got you. Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks for calling, Jen.
Thank you. Bye, sir.
You have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You know what?
You've got a good show here.
Oh, well, thank you. But you know what? I'm glad she called in because I plumb smooth forgot to tell everybody listening wherever they're listening at that the call-in number is 832-632-7904. And you can also call in if you're on Skype by messaging Mr. Paranormal, and I can accept it like it was a call. Do ask that let everybody know I do use the Skype phone number part, not the messenger part, but the phone number part, pretty much strictly for the show, so that there's not a lot of calls that's not about the show, in other words. Also, don't forget that Bud's website is www.oneworldinsight.com. And Bud, why don't you, since she wasn't aware of the media library, tell everybody real quick about what all they can find at your website.
Okay, on our website, oneworldinsight.com, there's on the multimedia library link, there's about 20 different television shows that I've done, one on quantum theology, the mystical experience, the story of the Buddha, dynamic learning, 4 sides of personal thinking, things like that they might have an interest in. There's about a dozen PowerPoints on all world religions, or 10 world religions. Quite a bit of stuff there. And feel free to link in there and enjoy yourself. There's a lot of information, and we're quite proud of it. It takes a lot of years to put it together.
In addition to that, is there any forums or groups anywhere that you're a part of that they can interact with you at, or do they just use your email at your site? Or I noticed you had a Facebook link at your site. I don't know if that's for a page or for a regular account.
No, just they can link with me at Facebook. Bud Hollowell at Facebook. They can, but the Conscious Living and Spirituality and One World Insight, that's a good place to start, and just email from that place, and we can link up from there. That'd be good to go. Also, if they want the book, The Quantum Gateway, that's on Amazon.com if they have an interest in reading the book. That's about it.
Also, folks, in addition to that, his book is, I got a link to Amazon with the book cover in the show description right below where his picture's at. and it'll be put in the archives tomorrow to make room for Saturday's show to be put on the front page. But you'll still be able to get to the archive and put it over and link to Amazon from there. And for those of you that do want to link from my site, I'm going to be do a little shameful thing here in a minute. I get a little commission from Amazon if I sell the book.
Go get them.
Hey, sorry folks, got to be honest, but
that's right.
You know, I got to tell you though, this is really, like I say, it's a very fascinating subject, and one of the things I like about what I've heard from you tonight is religious tolerance, because this is something that I've been in Yahoo groups for many years, and when you go to join a group or a forum, anytime somebody brings up a religious subject, whether they're, proselytizing or just sharing, it doesn't really matter. There's always a group out there that wants to tell them they're wrong, I've got the only way, and,
right.
As long as this goes on, there can be no peace, and, people don't seem to realize that we're all one part of a whole, and you can't look at religion as a end-all, be-all, right or wrong, because your relationship with God is supposed to be from within. The religion is great, and it's a tool, but it's not supposed to be the tool that it's being used for today, in other words.
Right. Well, ignorance is easy. Education is hard. You got to work for it. The spiritual path is beyond religion to me. So whichever religion we happen to be in, you use that, finish with it, then you move into the more universal teachings, which is compassion, forgiveness, gentleness, kindness. Someone asked the Dalai Lama one time what his religion was, kind of joking with him. And he says, my religion is not Buddhism. He says, my religion is the practice of simple human kindness. That's a pretty good description. So to me, if we can use whatever religion we happen to grow up in, by the way, we spend more time buying a car than a religion. We generally take in whatever our parents were, and we don't give it any thought after that. As opposed, let me shop around, see what's out there that's more useful. I think the next generation of young people will start going online. They'll start seeing whether other teachings are out there that are useful. But the religion part is where you begin. Then you move to the spiritual, the universal levels. Then you move into the meditation level of practice, where you can finally, when your mind is quiet down, your heart's open, you can finally sit and practice meditation. But you can't do it when you're running from the police. You got to clean up your act, and that's hard. It takes time and practice. But eventually, you're able to, okay, now I can sit without my mind beating me to death. And that's where you begin the practice of sanity. After that is then where you start to really subtract. You start taking things away and throwing things out, getting things out of your consciousness that have jammed you up, so that you can not just connect with the higher or the reality or the quantum potential, whatever you want to call it, but you can remain in that quantum potential. The difficulty of doing that, for those who have had the experience, is it's extremely blissful, so there's tears of joy. When you come back, there's tears of you're back here again. So that's trying to get to where you can hold on to that experience all of your days and remember who we truly are. And that's hard. But that seems to be the journey the way I can see it. So whichever religion people begin in, that's fine. Doesn't matter. Just don't stop. Learn and keep moving.
All righty. I was going to also mention, somebody in the chat room asked me if my guest this Saturday was going to be Tom Carey, because you see, last Saturday I made a mistake. I looked at the schedule at the end of the show like I usually do to tell people who my upcoming guest is, and I was looking at March instead of February, and I accidentally fibbed everybody and told them Tom Carey. I want to correct that, everybody. Tom Carey will be March the 6th at 8 p.m., which is also a Tuesday night, and I did make a mistake with that. It's not this month. This Saturday's guest, actually, guys, since you've asked, is going to be Robert Macklin, and his book is called The Jesus Delusion, and some people might think that he doesn't believe Jesus existed because there's many that don't. But in all honesty, from what I've checked of him, unless I misunderstood, what he's actually talking about is the delusion of the teachings, because not all teachings credited to Jesus actually came from Jesus. There's been some additives and mistranslations and stuff, through the centuries, and he's going to be taking a look at that.
That sounds good. Royce, I want to thank you for having me on your show. It's been great.
Well, okay, now I wasn't trying to rush you up. I was just trying to correct a mistake. But in all honesty, I do have to get up with my son John in the morning. He goes to school. He's 17. I've got to get him through this year and next year, and I got no more children in school. 3 kids.
Well, I know when my daughter finished high school. She finished high school when I was living in Alaska. She finished high school on Monday, and I moved to Hawaii on Thursday. With the last kid's gone, then they got to find you after that.
Well, before you do go, I want to find out, because I asked you about if you was going to write another book in the near future, but do you have any other projects out there coming up?
The project of the book I'm working on now is one, but the real work for me still, and it sounds kind of hokey, but it's still sitting, capital S. And yes, I do still teach at the University of Phoenix, and I teach humanities. I still teach comparative religion. Yeah, I do it. That's what I do in my workaday world. But the real work in terms of the spiritual stuff is the practice of sitting meditation, or in this case, just meditation when I'm walking around, and it doesn't look like I'm meditating, but I'm trying to practice being conscious. That's the real work I have in mind now. Work that I might share with people would go on to One World Insight, or if they have maybe a large group they want me to come and be a guest speaker, I'd be happy to consider that too. But I do guest speaking, yeah.
Oh, in that case, then you really wouldn't mind if I shared your information with some of the other radio show hosts I know, because I know a few people that's always asking me if I know somebody can be on their show.
Sure, be happy to.
In fact, there's a guy over at United Paranormal International.ning named Wade. He's a pastor, but he's not like a fundamentalist. He's into paranormal spiritualism and a broad spectrum. And he's been posting all over Facebook about looking for guests, and I can pass your information along to him, in other words.
I'd be happy to, Royce. That any time I can share this information is just lovely. It's a privilege.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and call a wrap on this one here for the night, if that's okay with you. But I would love to have you come back, especially when you get that new book out, and tell us a little something about that new book, if you don't mind.
Well, mainly it's more of a workbook. It's like, here's what do we do now? I've read the stuff. I understand kind of the consciousness game a little bit. I have a little background in meditation, maybe hypnosis. Well, can I have kind of like a 12-week program? What can I do? What kind of exercise can I do for the next 12 weeks to kind of make my life more rich and more conscious? So I focused on kind of a how-to book, where kind of like I read the stuff. Now, what can I do? I'm a real fan of doing things. If you just leave it as a theory, then it's kind of nonsense. Who cares? I like to bring it down to, okay, let me see if I can test this with personal experience. And that's kind of where I'm going to from here.
Well, you've listened to the guy that played Sheridan on Babylon 5. From what you're describing, you're never going to die. If you go by his theory, because he was telling Delina a story once about his old, I want to say it was Sergeant. Everybody kept asking him about why he would always wash his socks at the end of the day and hang them where he would hang them at. And he had told him some story about he does that so he'll always have something to do, because he always has to come home, come in after the war, get his other socks and fold them up and put them up. And he says, nobody dies that has something to do. So as long as I do that, I'll have something to do and I'll never die. Any of you maggots got a problem with that.
Well, one of the things in terms of the spiritual growth, for me now is really studying the phenomena of death very carefully and practicing personal death, quite honestly, to try and get comfortable with the experience, because we're all going to go through it again, and trying to pay attention to what that really means, giving up the body and trying to notice what happens as we transition. That's another area of study that I put a lot of energy into. We haven't talked about that tonight, but
actually,
another piece.
Before we go, now that you mention it, because I didn't think about that, because there's a lot of broad talk about this. For example, some religions will say you resurrect into your body. Some will say, no, you resurrect into a glorified body. As you know, it's like a lot of other things that's under debate, in other words. Now, me personally, it makes more sense that what you actually do is your transcendent body, your consciousness, leaves your body, but you're aware of everything even after it goes, versus like reincarnation, where you go out and come into another and you forget. In other words, you continue on in a different state other than reincarnating. I thought I would ask you if you'd clarify what your learning has led you to, to believe about that.
Oh, goodness, Royce, that's open another hour.
Yeah. Would you rather do another show for it?
No. But, well, sometime we talk about that, but the brief piece is something does survive the death of the body. That I'm absolutely convinced of. I've had enough experiences to know that. What that is and how that happens depends which books you read, and quite honestly, I'm not that interested in the reading as much as the practice. What do I know from people who were really skilled in this area? What do they have to share? And what can I have in my own personal practice to substantiate this? So for me, the death experience, it says the Dalai Lama, is one of the most important meditations there is. It brings our life into perspective. Who am I? What happens? What's the point of being here? The real tough questions. Like when we go to a funeral, it's like a splash of cold water in the face. Like, whoa, what's really happening here? Then we're awake for a couple of days, and we drift back and we fall back asleep, going to work again. So to me, death is a wake-up call for all of us, if we can keep in mind that we're just here for a visit. We're just passing through, and then what? So I put a lot of energy into that, is paying attention.
Well, I'm still in the reading stage, but I expect to be in a more proactive stage after I've finished the learning stage. Well, not that you ever really finish it, but I think you know what I mean by that.
Right. Yeah, I do.
When I get closer to being ready, I don't think I'm quite ready yet, in other words.
Well, I had prostate cancer here last year, so it kind of, again, brought things into focus. I've gone through the radiation and the surgery and so forth. It's kind of like, hello, come on now. That's one of the motivations to finish this book, get it done, get it out. It's like, okay, I've only got so many sunsets here. Let me focus and pay attention. So that's been very useful.
Yeah, you know what? That's if no other time. That's usually when somebody does start saying it's time to act, because it's kind of like your college exam. When it comes down to, the actual test day, everybody wants to cram at the last minute.
Right. Royce, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I hope you folks enjoyed the hour we had together.
Well, I know I certainly enjoyed it, Bud, and I hope that you come back and visit me here in the future, and I would love to stay in touch with you. You're a very interesting man.
Well, let's plan on that, and maybe sometime we'll do another show later on.
All right, that sounds like a winner to me, Bud. Thank you very much.
Good night, Royce. Good night, people.
Bye-bye. Okay, and once again, everybody, I want to thank you guys for coming. I couldn't have a show without my listeners any more than I could have a show without my guests, as I've said on a regular occasion, but I want to make sure there's newcomers that hear that, and that even though comers, I don't let them forget that. We're going to be back again this Saturday at the usual 1 p.m. I'll be talking to Robert Magdalene, the subjects of Jesus delusion. And now what I said about his book, That's the way I understood the description from reading it at Amazon. So I may find out I'm wrong when I'm talking to them. We'll play that one by ear and see how it goes. Guys, y'all have a good one. Y'all take care. And we'll be back again Saturday. Make sure you tell your friends. And don't forget to go to UnitedParanormalInternational.ning. They have a great bunch of people and researchers there and a great social network. Good night, and we'll see you later. Was for, your purpose.
Okay. The main goal was to tell the truth, not to get it, make a popular book, but just to lay it out. Here's what happened to me in the past 65 years, and here's what happened with quantum physics the past 65 years, and here's how it fits into all the world religions. For folks out there that are maybe sitting at the desk and have a pen or a piece of paper, if you draw a target, and the outer ring, then the inner ring, and then the very center ring, like a bullseye, one of the ways to explain how this fits together, the outer ring is religion. And the farther away you get from the center, the more individual it becomes. So you have Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, and so forth on the outer ring. And if you keep on going away, pretty soon you splinter the Christianity into different sects and finally down to one church that everybody thinks my church is the only one in town. So the farther out you go from the center, the more individual and strange and weird it gets. So at the outer ring you have religion. And most of us don't know that religion is a starting point. It's not an ending point. It's where you begin. So once you get maybe some clues about what the real game is here, you move to the inner ring, which is scholarship, where if you're a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu, you study the Gita real carefully, or the Kabbalah of the Hebrews real carefully, or you want to know exactly what happened in the Book of Ruth and from the earliest writings, but you really studied to start to get the real teachings, not the culture, the religion in the outer ring, but the inner ring. And that, if you push on that, you may start to eventually move towards the very center of the bullseye, which is the mystical experience. Because every religion is based on someone doing something that had this extraordinary experience. They come back from this thing, and they tell their followers that, man, I am the Father, one, you've seen me, you've seen the Father, or it's all one, or we're all, there's this atonement. But at that quantum level, it doesn't square with our space-time experience, so it sounds very crazy. And there's no words for us in the West to talk about it. In the East, they have words for it, but not in the West. But you have this very absolutely real experience, more real, actually, than what we're doing right now, the oneness of it all. But it defies our language, because it's not in space-time, it's timeless. But that's really what we find now with quantum physics. It leads us to the awareness that, yes, Virginia, there is...
And checked out your PowerPoint on your site, because her questions are derived from your PowerPoint slide.
Okay.
One of them. Okay. I think she probably she looked at more than one. Her first question was, wouldn't you say the Ardipithecus from 4.4 million years ago, presented in your PowerPoint Human Evolution on slide 19, looks a lot like Bigfoot?
Oh, I have no idea. That's a good point. I don't know. I'm not much of an expert on Bigfoot, but the evolution of the human animal through the 12 different fossil records, I think if we go back a couple million years, we can see how our particular structure has evolved till finally we have our latest version of what we call the biped, which is the Homo sapien, which started about 170,000 years ago. But if you back up a couple million years ago, it does look a lot like these pictures these folks are supposedly claiming is Bigfoot.
So I imagine you probably heard about this more than once then, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. I have no personal experience with that, but in terms of the science and of the human evolution, that's pretty clear. And I find that very useful to realize that this whole thing, all of it, is consciousness. The fundamental theme of everything is consciousness. Those folks out there listening, your cat's conscious, your dog is conscious. They're all doing the best they can too. Everything thinks it's human,
Right. I tend to really agree with you that at the end of the day, if you didn't have consciousness, well, then what told matter how to arrange itself to have what you got?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they say the Big Bang happened by chance, but I mean, there are trillions actually more than trillions, who knows how many gazillions of molecules and atoms all compacted into trees, animals, different animals, humans, planets, you name it.
Right.
Well, something had to be able to, otherwise wouldn't it just kind of come up like a bowl of gelatin or something?
I don't know. Some of these questions are too far beyond us to give a very intelligible answer to, but there's all kinds of theories on that one. But I know that we can prove, not we, meaning me, but scientists have shown very clearly. Back now.
Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio, where truth equals reality, and truth is often stranger than fiction.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Palace Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me today is going to be Bud Hollowell. And we're going to be talking about one of his most recent books titled The Quantum Gateway. And in this book, he does a lot of talking about where science meets spirituality, and some might say religion, although myself personally, I would consider the two separate, since for me, spirituality is really more of an esoteric thing than religion is more of a exoteric and more dogmatic, whereas and you look toward the outward side more, whereas on spirituality you look toward the inside more. And I'm just breaking that down so that people kind of get an idea why I do break it down, in other words. But we're going to talk about that tonight because, in all honesty, Bud, and there are some other scientists out there that are coming into a new field where quantum physics is opening up and showing how there's a whole new science out there that's related to spirituality. And in my personal opinion, I think it's probably some of the similar knowledge the Egyptians had that was lost to us, but we can go into that during the show. I've talked to Bud a couple of times now, and I think it was very gracious to come on my show. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce him, and I'm going to let him tell you a little something about himself. Bud, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Royce. Thanks for having me on the show, and welcome, everybody.
I want to thank you for coming to the show. I really do enjoy you. You seem like a very nice, a very professional person, and I think we're going to really have a lot of fun tonight. I'm looking forward to it. But go ahead.
No, I agree with you. If we're not having fun, we're doing something wrong.
Here you go. So, real quick, why don't you tell us a little something about yourself and what got you in this particular area of research, in other words?
Well, Royce, I'm old, so I got a lot of stories. I'll try to keep them short here. For me, it all kind of started with baseball back in the 60s when I was a ball player and was using, it turns out, hypnosis to improve my batting skills, and later on went into the business of hypnosis. And one of the first clients I had up in Alaska started doing past life regression work, which just blew me away in the 1970s. But eventually I started doing a lot of past life seminars, which led into exploring the different religions and their perspective, like Christianity and how it takes a perspective towards reincarnation, which was very common for the first 5 centuries of the religion, and Hinduism, Buddhism, and so forth. And I was working at that for about 10 years doing past life classes. Then the issue of quantum physics came in, which caught me off guard at first in the 1980s. And then I really got into it, studying how it does explain a lot of the mystical experiences in all religions. So the bottom line being, when you have the mystical experience, for Christians, of course, it'd be like the born-again experience, or in the Buddhists and the Hindus, everybody has a description of that experience. And the point is, it is a real experience. And quantum physics allows us to get an idea of, yes, that is a real phenomena. The fundamental unit of consciousness is really the game. It's not matter, it's consciousness that's infinite. And quantum physics now is starting to explain a lot of the whole fundamental pieces of mysticism.
Right. Now, I was going to let you know real quick, like Jennifer's sitting in there in the chat room, and she may not want me tattling on her, but she just said, wow, he's that old man. He looks great.
I still work out. You know, I'm old, but I'm not dead. We have here in Polk County, we have a senior games tournament. You got to be 50 to play, and I'm in the 69 group. And boy, there's some folks out here that can still do it. So I'm still out there throwing the discus and the javelin and running the 100 and so forth. So I'm still out there.
Well, I tell you what, you sound like you stay very active, and I would imagine probably just your research keeps you pretty active too, doesn't it?
Well, that does, yes. I've been teaching at the University of Phoenix for about 12 years now, and teach world religions and humanities, and I've enjoyed that. But I've always enjoyed just a physical part of it, just running and working out. That's just part of my old carryover from baseball, I guess. But I found when I was living in Hawaii for a long time that if I didn't run and work out, then the meditation was very foggy. So it kept me working out so that I could think more clearly during meditation. That was helpful too. It all fits together.
Okay. Well, listen, I was thinking, why don't you real quick, like kind of give us a, sort of a brief summary about what you've kind of covered in your book, maybe what your end goal.
There is something beyond space-time, and we can prove it. That something beyond space-time contains all past and future. We can prove that too. And it operates like this phenomenal consciousness, this one consciousness. Now, to me, that's the 21st description of what we used to call God, that phenomena. But it is in that quantum level that defies our space-time logic. That sounds so screwy. But a lot of people are pushing on it now to understand how it fits together. So that's kind of my basic take on this whole thing and why I wrote the book, is try to explain how I arrived at this juncture where I can, because I still am an intellectual junkie. I still like to think hard. But in college, I did the Campus Crusade for Christ, and I was deeply into Christianity there for a while. But as you keep pushing, you realize, well, there's something more here, but I'm not getting the straight stuff, so you drop the religion, you keep the words of Jesus, you keep moving. But eventually, for me, you cycle back around after I studied the Hindu teachings and the Buddhist teachings and the Sufi teachings of Islam and so forth, and you find it's really more a study of vocabulary. It's like whether you use an Apple machine or a PC, you learn how to work it. So that's what that means. So for me, all the religions are very useful if you understand the vocabulary.
Right. And you also, a lot of people don't also realize on these religions that so many of them have so much more in common than they themselves don't even realize.
Absolutely. One of the difficulties we have is we tend to associate our religion with our culture, like American Christianity, or God wants us to be rich or wants us to be powerful. Well, that's nuts. If we really study the teachers in each of the religions, they're absolutely wonderful and right on the money. Now, the culture will take it and distort it and quite often use religion as a weapon to go to war. But if we can really sit and listen to the real teachers, they're absolutely congruent. Compassion, love, forgiveness, all the qualities that we all admire. But that's too tough. That's hard work to get to that level.
Well, I got to tell you. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm with you. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, one of my listeners in there, Jen, was just saying, or not saying, but she was showing me that she listened, or not listened to, but